At 5:47 a.m., I heard the key turn, slow, careful, like whoever was outside didn't want the lock to make noise. I'd been awake for hours. Not pacing, not calling again, just sitting at the kitchen table with the overhead light off, the house lit only by the stove clock and the faint gray coming through the window above the sink. The coffee I'd made at midnight had gone cold in the mug. I never dumped it out. It felt wrong to clean up anything. The deadbolt clicked. Then the door eased open. Amy stepped inside like she was coming home from a late shift, not after 24 hours of complete silence. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot that looked like it had been redone in a hurry. One of her shoes squeaked on the tile because it was slightly damp. She held her purse high against her ribs, both hands on it, like it was the only thing keeping her together. Her phone had been off. Her location had disappeared the day before. Every call I made had gone straight to voicemail until the voicemail filled up. I'd stopped leaving messages around 2 a.m. because I couldn't stand the sound of my own voice begging into nothing. She took one step in, then froze. Her eyes found me in the kitchen like she'd walked into the wrong house. For a second, neither of us moved. No, hey. No, I'm sorry. No explanation lined up behind her lips. Just the sound of the furnace kicking on and the quiet hum of the refrigerator, like the house was still trying to pretend this was normal. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't ask if she was okay. I just watched her face, how it tightened, how she measured the distance to the hallway, how her shoulders lifted like she expected impact. In that moment, I already knew. Not the details, not the whole story, but the shape of it. Something had broken for good. Before that morning, everything looked stable from the outside. Solid. Predictable. The kind of marriage people assume is safe because nothing dramatic ever seems to happen. Our house in Springfield sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac with 2 maples in the front yard that dropped leaves too early every fall. I handled most of the upkeep myself. Roof inspections in the spring, furnace filters every quarter, lawn edged clean along the driveway. Structure mattered to me. If something creaked, I fixed it. If something drifted out of alignment, I corrected it. Inside, our routines ran the same way. Dinner around 6:30. News on low volume. Dishes washed before 8. Weekends meant errands Saturday morning and a walk through the neighborhood Sunday evening if the weather held. We had summer plans pinned to the refrigerator, small things. A trip to the lake in July. A barbecue for friends in August. Nothing flashy, just steady. Amy moved easily inside that life. She laughed at the right moments. She remembered birthdays. She kept a list on the fridge of projects she wanted to tackle. Paint the guest room, reorganize the pantry, replace the patio cushions. On the surface, it all held together. She mentioned Nate now and then. An old college friend, she'd said the first time his name came up. Casual. Offhand. They'd reconnected online, she explained. He'd moved to Denver. Worked in finance. Engaged, she added quickly, like that detail made everything automatically harmless. I never made much of it. People have pasts. People have friends. I wasn't the jealous type, and I wasn't interested in policing her phone. Trust, to me, was like the framing of a house. You don't keep checking if the beams are still there. You assume they are unless something shifts. But there were small moments. Ones I filed away without meaning to. A few times, when I walked into the room, I noticed her flipping her phone face down quickly. Not slamming it down. Just turning it over with a soft, practiced motion. Once, she angled the screen toward her chest before locking it. Another time, she muted a notification and slid the phone into her pocket like she'd forgotten she was holding it. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone guards their privacy a little. Everyone has conversations that aren't for public review. I didn't ask who she was texting. I didn't hover. I kept moving through the house like I always did, checking the mail, sorting receipts, planning out the next week's work schedule. If there was tension building, it was quiet. Not arguments. Not slammed doors. Just small delays in her answers when I asked about her day. A slight distraction at dinner. A few evenings where she said she was tired and went to bed earlier than usual, phone in hand. Looking back, it all fits neatly into place. But at the time, it blended into the background of a normal marriage. Nothing sharp enough to grab hold of. Nothing loud enough to demand attention. So I ignored the hairline cracks. Until the morning she walked through the door at 5:47 a.m., and the whole structure shifted at once. The first clean break in my thinking didn't happen in the kitchen. It happened later that afternoon, after she'd showered, slept for 2 hours, and woken up with a story already rehearsed. She said she'd left work around 5 the day before. Traffic had been bad. She took a wrong exit outside the city and ended up farther south than she meant to. Her phone battery died somewhere along the highway. She claimed she tried to find a charger at a gas station, but nothing worked. Eventually, she found a roadside motel, paid cash, and decided to wait until morning to drive back. She delivered it in pieces. Not rushed, just careful. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't challenge the timeline. I just nodded and let the words land where they wanted to. Around 3 that afternoon, her sister Claire called me. Claire isn't dramatic. She doesn't speculate. She deals in specifics. I thought Amy told you she left at 5, she said. That's what she said. There was a pause. Papers shuffling on her end. She texted me at 2:03 p.m., saying she was heading out early. She said she had plans. I figured you knew. Plans. I thanked Claire and hung up without adding anything. I walked into the den, opened my laptop, and pulled up our shared credit card account. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shaking. I just wanted to see if anything lined up. At 7:12 p.m., there was a charge at a restaurant in downtown Denver. A place I recognized, upscale but not flashy. The receipt summary showed 2 glasses of wine. Not one. Denver wasn't a wrong exit. It was deliberate. 45 minutes in the opposite direction of home. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the screen. 2:03 p.m. She leaves work. 7:12 p.m. Dinner in Denver. Phone dead. Cash motel. The math didn't struggle. It settled. For years, I'd been quick to smooth over inconsistencies, to assume good intent, to fill in gaps with explanations that protected the structure of what we had. This time, I didn't. I stopped looking for excuses. I stopped building bridges over missing pieces. I just let the information stand on its own. There's a shift that happens when you move from emotion to observation. It's subtle but permanent. The panic drains out. The need to confront fades. What's left is clarity. I printed the credit card statement and set it on my desk. I wrote the times down in a small notebook I keep for work estimates. Just facts. No commentary. When Amy came into the room later that evening and asked if I was okay, I looked at her differently. Not with suspicion. With focus. Something had happened between 2 and 7 that she wasn't going to volunteer. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to get her to tell me. I was preparing to understand it without her help. She thought I'd believe her story after 24 hours gone. The wrong exit. The dead phone. The roadside motel with no charger and no working landline. Each piece was shaped to sound inconvenient, but harmless. Bad luck, not betrayal. I sat across from her at the kitchen table that night while she told it again. This time slower, like repetition would sand down the rough edges. I didn't want to wake you, she said. I figured I'd just explain in the morning. I noticed she never once said where the motel was. Not the name. Not the town. Just off the highway. Vague enough to avoid follow-up. Specific enough to feel real. I didn't argue. That was the part she wasn't prepared for. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. In the past, if we disagreed, I'd press. I'd ask questions until we circled the issue enough times to call it resolved. This time, I let the silence sit between us. Not hostile, just steady. Inside, something had already shifted. It wasn't anger. Anger has heat to it. This was colder, cleaner. The moment I saw that restaurant charge in Denver, something in me detached from the version of her sitting across the table. The woman explaining traffic and battery percentages felt like a character in a story I'd already outgrown. She watched my face carefully as she spoke, measuring for cracks. Waiting for me to challenge a detail so she could defend it. Waiting for volume. I gave her none. Okay, I said when she finished. Just that. Her shoulders loosened slightly, like she'd braced for impact that never came. She reached for her water glass and took a long sip, eyes still on me, searching for a sign. I didn't offer one. That night, when she went upstairs, I stayed at the table and replayed everything in order. Claire's timestamp. The credit card charge. The missing location. The wine. 2 glasses. I pictured the table at that restaurant. Low lighting. Closed seating. The kind of place you don't wander into by accident. I didn't try to imagine what happened after dinner. I didn't need images. I needed structure. At 10:14 p.m., she'd sent me a text. Phone dying. Might crash somewhere safe. Love you. I read it again. There's a difference between someone making a mistake and someone constructing a narrative. Mistakes are messy. Narratives are assembled. I realized then I wasn't trying to save what she'd already damaged. I was recalibrating my position inside it. Around midnight, I moved into the guest room. Not dramatically, just quietly. I took a pillow, a blanket, and my phone charger. When she noticed in the morning, she didn't ask why. She already knew. Inside, everything had gone quiet. Not numb, not broken, just still. And in that stillness, I began planning the next step. Once I stopped reacting, I started noticing. Not in a dramatic way. I wasn't following her around the house or checking her phone when she left it unattended. I just paid attention to what was already in front of me. When she spoke about that night again, because she did, casually, as if adding details would strengthen it, there were pauses. Not long enough to alarm someone who wanted to believe her. Just long enough to register. She avoided saying Nate's name. Instead, it was an old friend or someone I used to know. The words shifted each time, like she was testing which version sounded less dangerous. When I mentioned him directly, calmly, without accusation, she didn't deny it. She just went silent. That silence told me more than any confession could have. At dinner 2 nights later, she knocked her fork against her plate twice before picking it up. Small tremor in her hand. She took careful sips of water between sentences, buying time. Her eyes didn't hold contact as long. They flicked toward the hallway, toward the front door, like exits mattered more than answers. I began asking neutral questions. What time did you get to the motel? Do you remember the name of it? Which highway were you on when the phone died? Each question was delivered evenly. No edge, no raised voice. Her responses came layered with uncertainty. I think around 10. I can't remember the name. It was dark. I wasn't really paying attention. Details fade over time. That's normal. But the kind of night she described, lost, alone, stranded, should have left sharper impressions. Fear tends to carve memory deeper, not blur it. The facts lined up without me forcing them. I checked the cell phone account online. Her device had powered off at 6:48 p.m. Not a slow battery drain. A shutdown. It came back online at 5:31 a.m., 14 minutes before she walked through the door. I wrote the times down in the same small notebook. Not because I needed proof for her. Because I needed clarity for myself. I also noticed what didn't happen. She never offered to show me her call log. Never suggested we drive back and prove the motel existed. Never expressed anger that I might doubt her. Most innocent people push back. They demand to be believed. Amy focused instead on calming me. Please don't be upset, she said one evening, touching my arm lightly. It was just a bad situation. Just. I let her hand rest there for a second before moving to clear the dishes. The house felt different now. Not hostile. Just thin. Like the walls had lost insulation. I wasn't trying to catch her anymore. I was documenting reality as it presented itself. And reality was consistent. More consistent than her story. The night she didn't come home, I didn't sit still. By 9:30 p.m., her phone was going straight to voicemail. By 10:15, her location sharing had stopped updating entirely. It didn't fade out gradually. It froze on a stretch of highway outside the city and stayed there. At 11 o'clock, I called the local police non-emergency line. I kept my voice steady. Explained that my wife hadn't returned from work, that her phone was off, that it wasn't like her. They told me adults are allowed to disappear for a while. Suggested I wait until morning. I didn't wait. I called 2 hospitals in the area, then 3 more closer to where her last location had shown. I described her car, her height, the color of her jacket that morning. Each time I hung up, the kitchen felt quieter. Around 1:40 a.m., I drove the route she would have taken home. I scanned shoulders for stalled vehicles, looked for flashing hazard lights, pulled into 2 gas stations along the way and asked if anyone had seen a woman matching her description come in needing a charger. Nothing. At 3:15 a.m., I went back home and filed a missing person report in person. I sat across from a uniformed officer under fluorescent lights and answered questions about our marriage. Any recent arguments? Any history of her leaving unexpectedly? Did she have friends she might stay with? I said no to all of it. Because until that night, it was true. By sunrise, a few of our neighbors knew. One of them volunteered to drive the outer roads that afternoon. Another shared a photo of Amy's car in a local community group online. People meant well. They organized quickly. Concern spreads fast in a quiet neighborhood. When she walked through the door at 5:47 a.m., I hadn't slept. I had already pictured outcomes I didn't want to name. So when the truth started forming in front of me over the next few days, it didn't stay contained between us. The missing person report had to be closed. I had to call the officer back and explain she'd returned. He asked where she'd been. I gave him the motel version because it was the only story officially available. But paperwork leaves traces, and so do credit card statements. Nate wasn't just a name in our house. He was engaged. His fiancée lived in Denver. When she saw the same restaurant charge, on their shared account, same time, same place, questions formed on her side too. I didn't contact her. I didn't need to. Truth moves outward on its own once it's set in motion. What happened that night stopped being only about my marriage. It crossed into other lives, other plans, other futures built on the same assumption of stability. By the time Amy realized the ripple effect, it was already beyond containment. This wasn't just a private failure anymore. It was documented, reported, noted, and it wasn't me who had expanded it. I didn't confront her immediately. I waited 3 days. Long enough to confirm the timestamps. Long enough to speak once with an attorney for a consultation. Long enough to understand exactly what I needed and what I didn't. On the 4th evening, after dinner, I asked her to sit down at the kitchen table. She hesitated, just slightly. Then she sat across from me in the same chair she'd been using all week. The overhead light cast a clear shadow across her face. No soft angles. No dimness to hide inside. I set my phone on the table between us. "I'm going to record this," I said calmly. "Not to attack you. Just so we're clear." Her eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" "Because I want the truth. And I don't want either of us rewriting it later." I pressed record. The small red icon appeared on the screen. "Tell me what happened that night." She inhaled slowly. "I already told you." "I know. Tell me again." There was a long pause. The kind that stretches thin and fragile. "Please don't get angry," she said. "I'm not angry." That part was true. She stared down at her hands. Her wedding ring caught the light as she twisted it once around her finger. "I went to see Nate," she said finally. The words came out low, almost flat. "We had dinner." I didn't mean for it to turn into what it did. I didn't interrupt. "I turned my phone off because I didn't want you calling while I was there," she continued. I didn't know how to explain it. I told myself it was just catching up. But I stayed. I stayed at his place. There it was. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just stated. I let the silence settle after she finished. Not as punishment. Just as acknowledgement. "Did you plan it?" I asked. She hesitated. I knew I was going. That was enough. I stopped the recording and set the phone face down. "I filed a missing person report," I said evenly. "I called hospitals. I drove the highways looking for your car." Her face tightened. I didn't think. I know. Another quiet stretch passed between us. No shouting. No accusations. Just two people sitting inside the remains of something that had already collapsed. "I can't stay in this," I said finally. Not after that. Tears formed in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She didn't beg. Maybe she understood that the decision had been made before this conversation even started. "I need you to pack your things," I told her. "You can stay with Claire." She nodded once. I stood up, took my phone, and walked into the living room. Upstairs, I could hear drawers opening, closet doors sliding along their tracks. The house didn't feel explosive. It felt final. She moved out that weekend. Claire came with 2 storage bins and a quiet efficiency that told me she already understood more than she was saying. They didn't linger. Clothes first, then toiletries, then the small framed photos from the hallway, ones Amy chose without asking. I stayed in the garage while they loaded the car. Not hiding, just giving space. By Monday, I had met with the attorney again and started the formal process. No dramatic filings, just paperwork, asset lists, account summaries. The structure of our life reduced to columns and signatures. The divorce dragged out longer than the confession. Not because I fought her on everything. I didn't. But property requires clarity, and clarity takes time. The house was in both our names. The mortgage had been paid evenly. I had documentation for the upgrades I'd covered, roof repairs, landscaping, the new HVAC system 2 years back. Numbers speak without emotion. Amy's attorney pushed for a sale at first. Clean break. Divide the equity. Move on. I declined. I'd built too much inside those walls to walk away quickly. Not memories. Infrastructure. Stability. I wanted the house. In the end, the court awarded it to me. I refinanced in my name alone. It wasn't a victory. It was a recalibration. Outside our legal process, things shifted on their own. I never told anyone the details of what happened. When neighbors asked, I kept it simple. We're separating. That was enough. People fill in blanks without assistance. Rumors still found their way through. Amy worked for a mid-sized firm where reputation mattered. She'd taken a day off without notice. Then there was talk. Someone had seen her at that restaurant in Denver. Someone connected it to Nate. Engagements unravel loudly in certain circles. I didn't start any of it, but I didn't correct it either. Within 2 months, she'd left her job. Officially, it was pursuing other opportunities. Unofficially, the tension had become too much. Offices have a way of shrinking when people stop trusting you. Nate's engagement ended quietly but completely. I heard that through Claire, who heard it from someone else. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't need them. Everything unraveled without my help. That's what struck me most. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't exposed messages online. I hadn't called his fiancée or sent proof. I hadn't tried to destroy anything. I just stepped out of the way and let truth move at its own pace. By the time the final hearing arrived, the anger phase had already burned itself out. On her side, on his side, in their respective circles. All I did was show up in a press shirt, answer the judge's questions clearly, and sign where I was told. The story didn't need my amplification. It carried its own weight. The day I signed the final papers, it was raining. Not a storm. Just steady, even rainfall that flattened the dust along the driveway and darkened the wood fence out back. I remember noticing how clean everything looked afterward. Washed down. Defined. I didn't feel relief the way people describe it. No rush of freedom. No sense of triumph. Just completion. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and disinfectant. Amy stood a few feet away while we waited to be called in. We didn't argue. We didn't revisit anything. There wasn't anything left to debate. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just diminished. Like the version of her I'd known had already stepped aside, replaced by someone more cautious, more aware of consequence. When the clerk handed me the documents, I read each page carefully. Not because I distrusted the process, but because that's how I operate. Line by line. Confirm the terms. Confirm the spelling. Confirm the numbers. Then I signed. My name looked steady on the page. Outside, the rain had eased into a mist. I drove back to Springfield without turning on the radio. The silence in the truck felt earned. When I pulled into the driveway, the house didn't feel empty. It felt honest. There were fewer shoes by the door. Fewer mugs in the cabinet. Her coat hook in the hallway was bare. But nothing in the space felt deceptive anymore. No hidden timelines. No stories running parallel to reality. I walked through each room slowly that evening. The guest room was back to being just a guest room. The closet space on her side of the bedroom was half open, cleared out except for a forgotten scarf on the top shelf. I left it there for now, not out of sentiment, just because removing it didn't matter. I sat at the same kitchen table where she'd told her story weeks earlier. The overhead light hummed softly. The refrigerator kicked on. The structure of the house, the framing, the wiring, the systems I'd maintained, was still solid. What changed wasn't the building. It was the narrative inside it. I didn't celebrate. There was no call to friends. No announcement online. No symbolic gestures. I made a simple dinner. Grilled chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. Washed the dishes immediately after. Wiped down the counter. Turned off the lights room by room before heading upstairs. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly when there's nothing left to contest. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept through until morning. Sometimes I think the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was those 24 hours of not knowing. The space between 2:03 p.m. and 5:47 a.m. stretched wider than the divorce ever did. In that window, my mind filled with possibilities, accidents, hospitals, ditches along the highway. I searched for her like she was missing, not realizing she had already chosen to be gone. That's what stays with me. Not the dinner in Denver. Not the night at his place. Not even the confession at the kitchen table. It was the silence. The deliberate turning off of a phone. The decision to let me sit in uncertainty while she built a separate reality somewhere else. That's when the marriage truly ended, long before she stepped back through the door. I understand something now I didn't before. If someone can disappear without explanation, they've already been leaving in smaller ways for a long time. You just didn't notice the gradual shift. The house is quiet these days. Not hollow. Not heavy. Just steady. I still wake up early. I still check the locks at night. I still keep records and fix what needs fixing. But I don't chase missing signals anymore. If something disappears now, I let it go. Because the moment someone chooses silence over honesty, they've already told you everything you need to know. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.